Hello and welcome to this episode of the Hello Firstname podcast, Season 2. My name is Rasmus Hålin, author of the book Hello Firstname, and the theme of this season is how to solve the content crisis for personalization. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Hello Firstname podcast, Season 2. My name is Rasmus Hålin. I'm the author of the book Hello Firstname, and the theme of this season is how to solve the content crisis for personalization. The content crisis is the final hurdle standing between marketers and the dream of truly scalable personalization. And from last season's insights, two big themes emerged. So after solving the data crisis, the content crisis suddenly becomes the next major challenge. Second, Gen AI has really taken the spotlight, offering exciting possibilities to tackle these content challenges. So these two areas merge into the content layer, a concept very similar to that of the data layer, and one that is predicted to revolutionize how easily and fast content flows until it meets the eyeballs of actual customers, either in static published content or in the personalization layer, which is exactly where this podcast is headed. So this season we'll explore what the content layer looks like, from getting master content sorted to having one-to-one personalization, and how Gen AI can make the content pipeline flow, its do's and its don'ts, and the top use cases. So let's dive in. Remember that all models that we discuss in this podcast can be downloaded and are free to use. The original book, Hello Firstname, can likewise be downloaded as either the full audiobook or as a written abstract, and I'll make sure to put all links in the show notes. Also worth mentioning is that the podcast is brought to you by our sponsor, the omnichannel marketing automation platform, Agilic. You can visit www.agilic.com for more information. But now on to today's guest, and I am extremely happy to have you here on the guest, Julie. We had this wonderful conversation the other week about content and what that means, and I met some of your colleagues in London who said, "Oh, wow, we need to talk to Julie because she's always talking about content." So I figured that you'd be like the perfect guest, and the conversation that we had actually confirmed that. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, Rasmus.
You've been with Pandora for quite some time now. And before that, you had a fascinating career trajectory. I'd say like CX and Personalization Manager is your current title. But like in your own words, how would you describe your journey within marketing and personalization?
I actually started out like as a business psychologist. So my fascination for marketing actually started from a fascination of the human mind and what makes us tick and what makes us social and so on. So from there, I kind of moved into consumer behavior, and that became my absolute jam. So brand management and marketing was kind of like the natural step from there. So I actually started my career as a very classic brand manager, brand consultant in one of the big agencies here in the Nordics, and moved to Pandora now 3 years ago. First, more on the brand side as a CMO consultant. And now I moved into more of the go-to-market and the execution. So a little bit between marketing and technology, where I sit as a customer experience and personalization manager, which basically means our team looks at making sure that a person in the UK who just loves gold jewelry gets different content than the guy in Italy who's just looking for a quick gift. So in very simple terms, that's my job.
And actually, before we get too deep into this, there may be someone out there who don't know Pandora or is not familiar with the scale of your business. So maybe you could put a few words to, how big is Pandora? Because I know it's super big, but not everybody may not be familiar with that.
Absolutely. So Pandora is the world's largest jewelry brand measured in volume. So that actually means that in last year, so in 2023, we sold so much jewelry that it actually corresponds to somebody receiving a piece of jewelry every third second the entire year over. So that's a lot. We are in total 33,000 employees. Our global market kind of spans across more than 100 countries. And yeah, we keep growing, which is actually pretty exciting. We originated as a jewelry brand here in Copenhagen around 40 years ago now by a goldsmith called Per Enevoldsen. And then in the year 2000, the Pandora charm bracelet was found. And that basically set the journey off from approximately 50 50 employees in Thailand and 7 in Copenhagen to now being 33,000 just 24 years later.
Yeah, that's crazy. So massive scale, and I can only start to imagine, and we're going to have a conversation about this, how you're managing the content layer and how the pipeline of content is flowing and how you're working with that. But one thing that just I want to mention, I mean, you mentioned this thing about psychology, and I always, I'm not wearing particularly a lot of jewelry, but I learned that especially with the charms, that people put a lot of emotions into what the charms mean for them. So I had this charm when I had my first child, and this charm when we had been together for a year, and so people put a lot of emotions into that. So the symbolic value of the jewelry generally surpasses by far sort of the monetary value of it. So that
Absolutely. And
must bring a lot of interesting stories to tell.
it is. It's everything from my boyfriend's last name is Bird, so I have this bird charm, to more style-based jewelry choices. I think we're one of the few value propositions out there that is truly customizable jewelry, and that's also
Yeah.
what makes us so special.
Yeah.
There's this anecdote that kind of says if two women walk into the room and they're both wearing the same dress, they will be enemies. But if two women walk into the same room and they're both wearing a Pandora bracelet, they'll be best friends. I can confirm firsthand that that's actually true.
That's funny. So coming into the topic of personalization, what excites you the most about leading personalization at Pandora with this like central role that you have?
I think it's the potential. We have so many products because, as you rightly say, like everybody has different types of emotion. We launch more than 400 products a year, which kind of means there's a lot to choose from.
Oh yeah.
And making sure that our customers actually find what they are looking for in that particular moment for their particular need becomes absolutely paramount. And this is where personalization can help. And we've now been on this journey for approximately 2 to 3 years, and we've launched a lot of use cases and generated a lot of revenue with personalization as well. So we're also convinced that it's the right way forward, and it's an absolute paramount. It has an absolute paramount place in both marketing and technology.
Interesting. So I shared with you before we had this conversation what I've called the content crisis manifesto, where we talk about how personalization at scale can overwhelm marketers due to content demands. How does this resonate with your experience at Pandora? Do you feel Pandora faces a content crisis? And if so, where is it most pronounced?
I would say crisis is maybe a big word, but our main challenge is we have so much content, and it's very, very difficult to figure out which content is actually used by the markets. So it's very difficult for us to know, okay, the UK like this head banner, US like this head banner, Italy preferred that one. This one was not used at all, because we have so many different markets that it actually becomes very, very difficult to track our content, also because we're activating across so many platforms, be it web, email, paid media, etc. So I think our biggest challenge is actually controlling and figuring out what the customer experience and curating the customer experience cross-channel with the right content and scale. So I think these things kind of need to come together, because launching specific use cases in specific markets in a specific channel, that we've been doing for a while, and this works really well. But actually making sure that that it's an experience that is curated, that goes cross-channel, that is extremely difficult. And for that, content kind of plays a paramount role. It's the thing the customer sees. So I would argue it's probably the most important piece of a customer experience is the messaging and the assets and what you're choosing to show to your customers. So
I've had this conversation with a lot of people, and some say, "Well, content is just data," and I say, but you might be able to store it in a database, but if someone is looking at it and it's something you want to present to the customer, that's, in my eyes at least, or in my opinion, that's when it becomes content.
Yes, absolutely. And also, there's also a difference between what we internally at Pandora perceive to be working versus what works for the customer, right? So, for instance, one thing we've been testing is internally we work a lot with our collections. But quiz question to you, Rasmus: would you be able to name one of Pandora's collections?
I'm falling short here. I must admit.
Exactly, most people do.
I'm behind on the shopping jewelry, I feel.
Most people do not know the difference between Pandora Moments, Pandora Signature, Pandora Timeless, and Pandora
Yeah.
Lab Grown Diamonds, etc. But
I have aided awareness, I should tell you. So I mean, they do ring a bell when you mention them.
yeah. But on the other hand, if I tell you you can buy rings, or if I tell you you can buy gold jewelry, that rings a bell. So we, for instance, done a large analysis that shows that our customers often shop by category and by metal.
Yeah.
So, for instance, for personalization, this becomes extremely important. So maybe
Yes.
we could put less emphasis on highlighting each of our different collections and more emphasis on, I do believe you're in the market for a ring right now, and let me show all the rings that could potentially match your interest. Or I know that you're a golden girl, so let's make sure that you see mainly golden jewelry. Like, for instance,
I'm a golden girl.
Full golden jewelry today. So I would not be properly targeted by silver jewelry if it comes to the personalization engine.
Yeah. So the scale that you mentioned before, I mean, with all the countries and all the localizations and so on, I have this idea that somehow, because I mean, you're used to working with a lot of variants of content, not for personalization, but for localization. So in some way, I think you could see personalization as just like the next natural step that you're taking to make it closer to the customer. I mean, you're already adapting the content to my language and even my locale to some extent, and like local customs and whatnot. And then taking it one step further to my segment, if I'm the male gift buyer, I think that's one of your segments, as I recall, or whatever segment that you have. That extra step is almost like a natural next step because you're already working on this. Is that fair to say?
It is fair to say, but I also do believe it depends where we are in the customer journey. So for, as you also rightly state in your book, like for awareness and passive consideration, so like the more brand-led campaign content, you should actually not be using personalization at all. Because other than sending lookalike audiences to Meta, you should actually not specifically hone down on specific audiences in particular here. It should be broad, and of course you can be smart about how you go broad, but where personalization really becomes a growth lever is as soon as it comes to active consideration. So when people start comparing products and looking for products and they know the brand, purchase, of course. So when you're adding things to cart, etc., and in the retention and the advocacy phase, so post-purchase. And especially there, that's often where we also have more information on our customers. So we might actually have their email address, and we might actually have a history of what they bought in the past. And this is where personalization can not just add a little bit of value, but a lot of value. So I'd say on some parts of the journey, like personalization plays a significant role. In other parts of the journey, it should actually not play a big role.
Yeah, I think you're right. And especially, I mean, I think this goes for all strong brands that, I mean, make the brand communication about the brand. Don't necessarily think about over-personalize something that is your story, because you don't want a version of your story for every single individual out there. You need to put yourself out there, put your brand out there, and you'll attract people who with whom that sort of resonates.
Exactly.
Let me just share something here, and I'll say for the ones who are joining this on video, you should be able to see this, and if the ones who cannot, you should be able to download this from your show notes. I see, and I just need to go out of full screen here. I will not be able to share it. There we go. All right, so this is actually the you see it now?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So this is sort of the actually this is from the Content Crisis Manifesto that you can download. So this is where you can see the content layer here on top, and you have the data layer here beneath. So data layer is concept that's pretty known to most people, like with data collection, master data, data modeling, data activation. And then the idea of the content layer is that we will have like a similar layer of data and how of content and how it is collected, and how you have master content in the same way as you have master data, how you'll be modeling your content, how you'll be activating your content on your website and on your inbound platforms in general. And then sort of squeezed in between these, where the insight or the data meets the content, this is actually where the personalization layer squeezes in. So how does this relate to how you're working with content in Pandora? Because as it is, the way the picture or the image that we see in the world right now is that the content layer isn't that integrated. It's a lot of large files and really big Photoshop things, just rendering things and whatever takes like forever, and repurposing it is often manual, and going from one step to the next is often quite cumbersome. But just to begin with, how do sort of the phases relate to how you're working with it in Pandora?
Absolutely. And I can resonate with this model. And I do believe that personalization moving forward becomes more and more about content now that we've figured out how to work with data more consistently, at least across a lot of companies. We call it plan, produce, prepare, publish, and perform. And it actually relates quite well to what you're saying here. So like planning the content and producing the content, that's classic marketing style. But there is something very specific about when you're actually designing experiences for personalization, because that's a little bit different. So now we're focusing more on the customer-led part of the content. So that would be active consideration, purchase retention, advocacy more. And there's kind of like, for designing the experiences, for planning the experiences, you would have like 4 things to consider. So who gets what, when, and where. So the audience, the journey stage, the channel, and the content.
Yeah.
That's kind of like planned. So you have your audience segments, you have figured out like, okay, it would be really good to give this golden girl a golden experience here and there. You have figured out like you want to activate this across channels on both paid media, web, and email. And you figured out, okay, so this is mainly for active consideration. So right before people start to buy. So that's the plan part. Then the produce part is, of course, do we have existing content? Because we have a lot of content. So if we can use something we already have, we should. And use that and repurpose it and tweak it. Or do we actually need new content? And there should be its own production cycle that goes fast, because usually this is also based on customer insights, right? So if you currently see a trend, you kind of want to make sure that you're capturing this as fast as possible, and you're able to produce the content as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Then we come to the very interesting part, and that is prepare. And in the prepare phase, this is kind of where you need to work with.
That's what I call content modeling.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's where you need to work with tags on block level. So basically, if we're, for simplicity now, just staying in the email channel, you would have an email block, let's say a header block consisting of a CTA button, a headline, and an image. That's what we call a compound asset. And we kind of need to have tags on each of these.
You call it a compound asset?
Yes, because you're combining different assets together. So you're
combined. Okay, yeah.
An image, and you're combining a headline, and you're combining a CTA. So all of these individual assets have tags, and together they create a compound asset which also has tags. And basically then we have a rule engine in the back. So that's the vision for the future, is having a rule engine that kind of says, okay, so this block has these tags and this content elements has the same tags, and I'm now deciding that right now we're showing this image to this customer, we're showing the other image to the other customer, etc., etc. So that then goes on block level. So both all assets need to be tagged and all blocks need to be tagged. The blocks could also go on web. They could also be in other channels. And then you come to activate and or publish. And that's basically where you need a content management system that's integrated. So somehow your content management system needs to link to all of your different channels. So most channels have different activation systems, but somehow you need to make sure that it can fetch the assets with the right IDs and with the right tags, and put it into the right activation platform in the right sequence. So for that, we basically have several systems working together. So content management system, that's what we call a content hub. That's basically where you store all your content with all the tags. Then a unified customer view. So we kind of need to know which customer to show what. So actually having a full DNA string of our customer. And then on top of that, we kind of need to make sure that all of this can get activated in a seamless manner and reported back, so that we can design experiences in the future that are even more relevant based on, this content did not work, this content worked, this one was shown twice, this one. So this is the vision we're currently working on.
That makes so much sense for me. And I think it fits quite beautiful with the model. I was just sort of in my mind picturing the phases sort of that you were describing here. I'll just share the image again. So you had sort of the decisioning here, and then this is probably where your website is, and being able to decide what is sent out, like as in an orchestrated experience, and what is actually shown on your inbound channels, and being able to take the insights from your data modeling and put those in there into the personalization layer.
Exactly. So it is exactly in this decision scaling. That would probably be what we call the rule engine. Figuring out which data to match with which type of content, that happens for us in what we call the rule engine, which could then be, if customer X is defined as ring buyer, please show content related to craftsmanship. And they will go in and pick up the prioritized craftsmanship content. The prioritization ideally in the future should also be based on what's most engaging, what have people clicked on or liked in the past.
So question, so the content that eventually, for instance, goes into a personalized email, where you create that, is that created in your content management system, or is something that you do in your execution platform, or how big of an overlap is there between the content that is on your website and what goes into an email?
I mean, there's some things, I think from a content perspective. So when it comes to copy, etc., there is a lot we can reuse across channels, but there is also just some content elements that do not work particularly well in particular channels. So an example could, for instance, be video is great on web, way too heavy in an email. So there you would rather work with a GIF. So that could have similar types of content inside, but it would be a very different format. So of course, on top of just working with uploading the right images with the right tags and the right videos with the right text, etc., there's also an element in versioning your assets in a way so it goes out in the right channel. And there we're, for instance, working a lot with cropping tools, so focal point cropping, potentially in the future AI cropping, so you can make sure that at least the images, for instance, have the right formats in the different channels and can be used the right way. Then there's also the other tricky thing, which is copy sometimes links together, right? Copy today is often written for one full email or one full web page. So what do we do now when we're actually starting to work on a blog level? How do we make sure that if it up here says, it's an ear party, and then the body copy it says, and you're invited, these two need to go together somehow, because otherwise it does not make sense.
Exactly.
So this
becomes fragmented. I think with the fragmentation, you could easily, there's the danger of losing sight of how does the actual end piece of compound communication look like.
Exactly. So this is what we're playing around with now, right? Like, can you lock certain blocks together, or can you somehow figure out so that that copy doesn't get fragmented and that you deliver one coherent experiences to each other?
So the way that I've seen some of the agile clients that I've seen master this to the best level is that they've separated the message from the channel. But there's the risk that if you separate it, if you move it too far away from sort of the actual execution, that's when you can have this alienation that you don't have a feel for how the the actual eventual email will look like, because you're all these. I mean, you're writing a text. If you cannot really see where it goes, you might sort of lose
Yeah.
some feeling for that. But the other thing is equally bad. If you build everything into the channels, then it's cumbersome, and you need to do like infinite variations that are almost similar for like per segment and per language and per territory and per. So that ends you up with like just too many flows, especially when you're doing emails and text messaging. So
It's super important that we can somehow automate the activation, so that it's not a person that needs to drag and drop different content elements into an email master template or a web page, but that you can actually, based on rules, the rule engine telling the content hub, okay, I want this image, and then it picks it up by itself. So I think that's also like an absolute key enabler for actually being able to work with personalization at scale, is that activation platforms are able to populate content automatically based on rules you're setting. And these rules also
before that.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of creating the actual variants for, obviously there are the localized versions of, I mean, an ad or like a text or a banner or whatever. There's the reformatting of that into the different channels, and there's the reforming of that into, or repurposing of that for the different locales and for the different, languages and localizations, and for the different segments. Are you using Gen AI, or where are you with you helping yourself with Gen AI in doing these repurposing and doing these like extra variants of the messages?
I think we're on a journey towards being able to using AI tools across actually all content management steps more and more. The challenge is a little bit, AI and all of these different elements becomes a little bit tricky to apply at scale before the foundation is built. So before we're actually able to track content end to end, and we have a content management system that from all the way from when the content is planned and briefed to when we're measuring the performance has one ID, it becomes very, very difficult to put AI on top. So where it, of course, is very like more easily adaptable use cases is, for instance, for cropping or for translations or these kind of things.
Even translations can be a bit iffy sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. So around that, you need the right governance flows, right operation,
the quality assurance.
Exactly, and that also needs to be built. So I'd say we're definitely on the path, and we're definitely looking into a lot of different things. But there is also just a foundational element that needs to be in place to be able to fully leverage AI at scale.
Yeah, and I think that's why we were looking at this image before. With, I mean, yes, we have sort of the content layer envisioned, but it has yet to be integrated. I mean, you don't have such clear processes as you do in the data layer for how do you get from one step to the next. But we have the feeling that Gen AI can greatly help us do that and do the repurposing of, maybe even instead of doing translations, it can create from the same brand LLM, can create the different assets for the different channels and for the different segments, or even for the individuals in your customer database.
A use case for AI I would love to see in the future would be for automatic tagging. So once this whole system is in place, to have an AI say, okay, on this image, I see a blue hat and a golden bracelet and these 5 charms, which for the performance means X, Y, and Z. That would be absolutely fantastic.
And
right?
that's probably not super far out in the future.
Probably not.
Be my guess. All right. So talking about different types of content, I had a conversation earlier today, and the content is such a broad topic, which also makes it quite confusing. So there's everything from like adverts and corporate visual identities and guidelines and templates, and there's text messages, and there's product images, and there's the About Us section on the website, and Contact Us. And I mean, all these things can basically be considered content, if you ask me. What I've found reasonable when discussing personalization and having this discussion about like inbound, what do I put on my website, what do I send out in my emails and my text messages, and what do I put in my app and push notifications and so on, is to make the distinction between what I call master content, which can be it's like the backbone. It can be localized then, and you can channel it and serve it publish it on your websites. That's master content. You don't personalize that because the About Us section is the About Us section. We may have it in different languages. And then on the other side, we have the execution content, or the personalization content could also be what we end up calling it. I mean, the messages that you use to like nudge customers gently through the journeys and get them back to the shopping basket or check out this new charm that could be something for them. This distinction like between master and execution content, does that resonate with you, with how you're working at Pandora?
It does. We call it brand-led content and customer-led content, in the sense that let's say Valentine's Day is coming up. That's a big bang.
Brand-led and customer-led.
Yeah. Big
like
bang activation could be you have a poster on Times Square. Could be we're doing TV. It's the whole big campaign activation, and then you have the customer-led content, which is much more tactical. Hey, we think this is for you. Would you be interested? Thank you so much for signing up to our loyalty club, etc. And the way we're working with it is actually classifying our content into what we call content categories and content subcategories. So a content category for us could, for instance, be what we call KCP, so key consumption periods. Valentine's Day could be one of them. And then on like the subcategory in that case would then be Valentine's Day. And for customer-led content, it could be something like the headline is occasions, and then a sub-headline is birthday. So if we want to give people a discount on their birthday, that's something that is much more tactical and content that kind of needs to be more personalized, because if we're not addressing you on your birthday, it's kind of a little bit pointless.
Okay, that makes sense. So brand-led and customer-led. I like that distinction. So I think it rhymes. I mean, as I also said to begin with, we're actually sort of using this podcast to explore sort of the concept of the content layer, because it's so brand new, and eventually it will end up, many places. I know that Scott Brinker and Franz are actually doing something with it here next week, which will be the beginning of December. I might not have published this podcast episode before that, but hey, so they'll probably make that available as well for download and revisiting and reviewing afterwards. So that's where it's going to pop up, and how it ends up depends a lot on the conversations that we're having in this podcast, including this one with you. So it could very well be that we end up borrowing some of your terminology. All right. We already discussed Gen AI. So looking a bit more into the future, what do you think the future holds for marketing technology when it comes to personalization?
I do believe we're going more and more into a future where one-to-one personalization is actually feasible and possible and realistic at scale. Because I think today it's feasible and possible, but I'm yet to see it in a lot of places applied at scale. Me too. So I believe that that's kind of what the future holds for personalization. And I also do believe we'll get better and better at striking the balance between not knowing enough and being creepy. I think it's something you talk about in the book, but it's finding this sweet spot about helping the customer shop and helping the customer connect with the brand in the way the customer wants. Like we as brands always believe that our customers evolve around us, but it's not true. We evolve around the customer. And I think over time we'll get sharper and sharper on what that actually means and what the customer actually needs. And also smarter on where is one-to-one personalization actually beneficial and useful. Like, for instance, I'm 100% convinced that product recommendations should be always one-to-one personalization. Whereas on a content perspective, the line gets a little bit more blurry, right? Because you have brand messages, you have customer-led messages. Where is the line in between? Which content should go out to all people? What should only go out to some? So I think all of these considerations is something that in the future will be much more streamlined. And then I also do believe we'll get smarter and smarter in the way we work with our data. So like actually being able to, because at Pandora, if you have not logged in or you come through an email into the website, we cannot identify you. So can we somehow work with cookies and other things to ensure that we actually still deliver a personalized experience for you that matters. So maybe the first thing is something out of the box, but once you click further and we come to your next best action, that we can actually better and better tailor to your needs based on how somebody behaves on the website.
Yeah.
For instance.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah. So, I mean, assuming too much from too little data and then addressing that in explicitly personalized communication is definitely something that we should try and steer clear of. And that's probably like the biggest fail of personalization. If you pretend that it's okay to have a conversation that's totally not okay, then you're going into something wrong.
And this is also where I would love to bring more psychological knowledge to the data, because I think the most powerful experiences, they are rooted in data and on true audience knowledge, but they are also rooted in gut feeling and common sense and creativity. And these two things kind of need to go hand in hand for a personalization to be truly impactful, because otherwise personalization also sometimes risks at becoming a little bit too tactical.
Yes.
That's often where the money lies. So can I just tweak this product recommender a little bit more, get a little bit more, which is great. But there's also the other part, which is delivering true experience value to the customer.
Something that connects.
Exactly.
And that displays or whatever data that you have. I think this is one of the dangers of personalization, is that data has been an issue for so long that there are so many people like trying to wrap their heads around getting like the perfect segment or the perfect propensity score and whatever. So they forget that, hey, if we don't have anything to say, and if whatever we choose to say isn't fun and engaging and in the right tone of voice, and if it's too weird, or if we somehow miss the mark in making it pleasurable to receive that communication, then it doesn't matter how perfect your segment was and how good your data is, which is what I'm hearing you mirror. It's just me trying to paraphrase. It may turn into something that is just in my opinion entirely.
Absolutely.
Yes. So what's your favorite use case where Pandora has personalized the customer experience, and what made that a success?
I honestly think now I just said that I'm hoping we're going into more experience-based future, and I still strongly believe in that, but it is product recommenders. Just simply from the pain point that we have so many products that it's just extremely powerful to write personalized for you. These are the things we can recommend you. And I'm kind of dreaming of a future where we can bring the power of product recommenders to the world of marketing as well, and their assets. So that I'm pretty excited about. And this use case has been great just because it was very successful, but also because it truly helps the customer shop. And I think this is the kind of experiences we should always be going for. We need to find things that actually matter to our customers. Another one I was actually also pretty excited about is we just recently tested category-based emails, for instance. So back to what I mentioned regarding the collections.
Gold girl, who cares about the collections? I care about golden rings.
Exactly. I care about rings, or I care about necklaces or earrings or bracelets. And that was also actually pretty cool to test, because we've done this entire clustering analysis of taking 60 parameters, behavioral data we know about our customer, try to see if we could cluster them together, measure the distance, and we actually found these 9 distinct segments, and they seem to be working. And that is also extremely, extremely interesting to see that, if somebody who's interested in rings sees more rings, they might engage with the content more. And it makes intuitively sense, but it's also really exciting to see the data behind it.
But that's how it often is. Sometimes the solution, the answer is just hiding in plain sight. And I think, when I listen to this, my first impression is like, duh, yeah. If I'm interested in rings, I'm interested in rings. But when your whole like production cycle is around launching the collections and what they're called and the schedule, blah blah blah, your head becomes full of that. So it's nice to be able to use the data to sort of reframe that, say, okay, what's really at play here? Help you turn that image from like inside out to outside in. I think that's
it's also like afterwards it becomes striking the right balance, right? Because we should also not stop communicating our collections, because collections play a powerful role as an emotional jewelry brand. So it's striking the right balance between somebody that just needs help shopping, might want to look at the rings, but somebody who wants to be inspired about the brand obviously needs campaign content.
So back to the distinction between brand-led content. This is where we are. This is what we stand for. This is how fantastic this new collection is, compared to, hey, I'm shopping for a ring. Customer-led content. Certainly, we're going into a whole other discussion where we can have that dialogue. My friend Franz, he was having this idea that basically, if you think about the founder of a company. If you could have a conversation with the founder of a company who knew everything like about you and everything about the product and the products and the sort of idea behind the company and the value proposition and the values and so on, if you could basically make everything go away between you and the founder being able to have this conversation with you, that would sort of be the end goal of personalization. And if you then think about a lot of the stuff that we've been discussing here, I mean, when can you say something that's inappropriate, or when can you conclude something on too? I mean, it's pretty clear that would the founder say this to you in real life? Would you be in a position? Would your history with said founder and thus the company justify that you're having like an intimate conversations about wedding rings, for instance? When would that be appropriate in this sort of real life conversation? And if the data doesn't justify you having this conversation, then you probably shouldn't, because if it would feel awkward in real life, don't do it in digital. Or at least make it seem like a coincidence. Make it seem like as if it's brand-led content. Don't claim that you are explicitly knowing something.
I think one of the very powerful elements of the Pandora brand as well is what it's that people take the jewelry and they make it their own. They apply the meaning themselves. So it's actually also really, really important to us that we don't take the founder mentality and this is what we stand for and this is what we are too much to our customers, because our customers also want to put their own meaning to our brand and to our jewelry. And that's also sometimes a hard balance for us to strike. For instance, it's very funny if you globally ask most countries, they do believe Pandora comes from their country. So I've heard Italians say it's Italian. I've heard British people say it's British. I've heard American people assume it's American.
It's like a big localization success, I would say.
It is, exactly. Yeah. It's a big localization success. So this is also a balance that needs to be of course you are a brand and you stand for something and you have your values and so on, but you also need to have this, we call it more global, more local. So you need to be able to adapt it in a way that is truly meaningful for where the customer is, and that is in the market.
And that can be totally different. I mean, just let alone like different Asian countries. I know there are huge differences to like preferences and tastes and which images you can and should use. And sometimes the solution is really to water it down, because then it scales more, and then you could get the same effect for less. All right.
Local holidays, for instance. I mean, Lunar New Year is celebrated in China, but nowhere else. We still need to mention for it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and Eid and Ramadan, and there are so many local things that doesn't necessarily follow the Gregorian calendar. All right, 2 questions left. Which advice would you give to marketers sort of trying to scale personalization today?
Build the foundation, and I would say split long-term innovation from short-term results. So what we often see is that if you bring these two things too much together, you either end up with a lot of tactical use cases, so a lot of short-term personalization use cases that bring a lot of revenue, and you forget to work on the long-term vision that might enhance the customer experience moving forward. But it's hard work, right? It requires integrating a lot of systems, figuring out how to scale content and how to scale the data, all of these kind of things. And I think that is probably the most paramount thing, because otherwise you end up being in the operational quicksand where you jump from one use case to the next.
So
and
like balancing short term versus long term.
Exactly, balancing short term and long term. And Pandora, we've actually managed in a way where we have two separate parts of the team doing each, to make sure that we are both testing and learning, generating the revenue, but at the same time, of course, also building the foundation and the long-term success for scalability, because otherwise we can only scale as many hands as we have. So we need content automation to be able to do true personalization at scale.
Wow, brilliant. All right, we're drawing towards an end here. This has been really, really interesting, Julia. But the closer here, and I'm asking everybody in this season, final question: what's your own favorite use case for Gen AI?
I think I've mentioned it already, and it is really unsexy, but content tagging. It's like, I'm super excited about this, because doing this manual is a lot of work for a lot of different people, because we have a lot of assets. And being able to do this by AI, and probably also in a more sophisticated manner than when a human needs to tag things, is just so incredible powerful. And
that's mainly on images, you mean? I mean, what's on the image? Being able to sort of capture that as data by visual recognition of what's on the image?
Absolutely. It would be tagging on a lot of different levels. So one, what's on the image or what's in the copy, but it would also be elements such as, is this more brand-led or customer-led content? In which journey stage should this be activated, et cetera, because nowadays, like, where's the line between passive consideration and active consideration? Where exactly is the line? Gen AI might have a really good answer to that, and I would love to hear it. Yeah.
Super cool. All right. Thank you so much for joining. This has been a really, really interesting conversation. So I really love the distinction between brand-led content and customer-led content. I'm feeling that this could perhaps sneak in somewhere. Apart from that, I felt there was a lot of sort of resonation between how you're working and sort of the stuff that me and Franz have been developing. So happy to get that at least sort of partially confirmed. At least for Pandora, it kind of makes sense. So it should also for other companies. So thank you so much for joining, Julia.
It was a true pleasure. Thank you so much for the invite, Rasmus.
And for the listeners, I just say thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'll put links to everything in the show notes, and I hope to see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to yet another episode of the Hello Firstname podcast. Remember that all models discussed in this podcast can be downloaded and are free to use. The original book, Hello Firstname, can likewise be downloaded as either the full audiobook or as a written abstract. All links are in the show notes. The podcast is brought to you by our sponsor, the omnichannel marketing automation platform, Agilic. Visit www.agilic.com for more information.